Thank you, everyone, for coming back to BBB Sharing. I'm Evie Karageorge, Director of Ignite. And today I have a very, very special guest with me, Chris Jones. Chris, you spoke at BizWorks a couple weeks ago. Part of our team went and listened to you speak. And I was so fascinated with what you do and all the information that you had. I forced you to come in here so that I can interview you.
It wasn't much of a force. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you for coming. So you are a leadership consultant, right? Mm-hmm. And the questions that I have for you, really working for a nonprofit especially, for the BBB, we have an issue connecting with accredited businesses and non-accredited businesses at that. But we also have a hard time getting our team to understand not the accreditation part, not the values of the company, but really getting them to help the businesses understand why it's so important to be accredited. Mm-hmm. So as a leader or someone in a leadership position, how do you have that difficult dialogue with your team and really helping them understand where you're coming from?
Are you talking about being accredited specifically, or just having a building relationships?
Building relationships, yeah. Especially with the community, because they're like, so what does it matter? What does it matter being accredited?
Yeah. Well, anytime that what you're really talking about is persuading people, right, to kind of get on board. And it goes back to how I talk about leadership, and I think that communication is a key part of that. And you heard me a few weeks ago. We talked about communication and how often is it that someone needs to hear your very important message, what's a very important message you're trying to communicate. And the common studies show that it's about 7 times that someone needs to hear it repeatedly before they start to have an idea like, oh, I think I understand this now. But I think it's 7 more times. And after that, I think it's 7 more times. I think it's difficult to over-communicate, and especially when it comes to leadership and managing teams, is that if you ever begin getting the complaint that you're over-communicating, I congratulate you. I think that's terrific because I think it's hard to do. And if you're over-communicating, I say just keep going because people need to understand the message that you are communicating to them.
I agree. I think I mentioned to you before, I love that Barry does those couch talks with us, which are the meetings. But what led you to want to get into this position that you're in? You're a leadership consultant. What led up to that?
Yeah, well, most of my career has been in Fortune 500 world headquarters, and I've always been involved in some level in training and development. And I love training people. I love speaking in front of groups. I love workshops, all those sorts of things. But what I specifically talk about is new managers, those who have just recently been promoted to a new manager role. And that's what I do primarily in my business. And it all started when I very first was in my first titled leadership role, or what I call my first manager role. And I failed pretty miserably at that. And what I found is, in some retrospective and looking back, well, why is it that I struggled so bad? Because I was actually a very good individual contributor. I was, you could call me a star performer. I'm not saying that to pat myself in the back, but that's why I became a manager, was because, hey, when you're a star performer, you're the easy choice to be promoted to a manager role. But those are not necessarily the skills that you need when you ultimately become a manager. So I looked back, I understood, well, what is it that really caused that to happen? And what I found is that I was performing for my boss. I was the kind of leader and manager I thought my boss wanted me to be, rather than just being who I am genuinely. So when I was managing project teams, I'm very successful at doing that. It's because I was just myself, and I was just asking for people to, hey, you help me out with this? And here's what the project is, and if you can get behind it. And that's how I should have led. That's how I should have managed my team, but I didn't. I was pretending I knew what I was doing and I had it all put together, but I didn't. And so that's led me to what I do now. Is I really am passionate about helping other new managers not have to go through the same thing that I did.
That's amazing, because my best friend, she works for Cisco Foods, which you've probably heard of that or seen a truck outside of a business.
Yep.
She just got promoted to a district manager position. She's been with the company 2.5 years.
Wow. Congratulations to her.
Thank you. She's awesome. She definitely deserves it. But I asked her, I said, so what's the training process now for you? And she said, there is no training process. I said, okay, that's weird, because when we onboarded, it was a 7-week training process as a sales rep. So you're going to be leading 10, 15 sales reps in a brand new district and there's no training for you? And she said, no.
That's not uncommon. Many of the organizations I work with, they don't have a formal management onboarding program. And I don't necessarily fault them because I think a lot just don't know any better.
Yeah.
So they're assuming, and you can see where the assumption comes. Hey, if you're a star performer, you figured that out, you're going to figure out management. Well, it's just an entirely different kind of skill set. So you can try to figure it out, and some do figure it out, but they do it through a lot of hits and misses, and it takes them a lot longer to do that. But what I do is I provide some of those foundational things. It's really just very simple frameworks. There's some simple systems, simple tools. If you just know what those are and how those fit together, your first manager role becomes a lot easier. Just implement these things. And these are all tried and true things.
Yeah.
They're things that I personally do. Everything I train on, I personally have done, I personally do, and they've also been validated with the leaders that I've worked with in my consulting practice now.
That's amazing because one of the things that, and I do agree with her on this, that her district manager put her in situations leading her up to this role. Like making her sit in for interviews, training new staff that would come in. And I don't know if he was doing it on purpose or if that was just him being a natural good leader, but he prepared her for this position. So there's no doubt in my mind that she can do this job, but most people wouldn't have any idea. In your field, what are those key fundamentals that help a leader prepare somebody to take their position, basically?
Yeah. Well, first, I applaud this leader that did it ahead of time. Whether it was on purpose or not, let's just assume that it was on purpose and strategic. It's one of the things I talk about. I would much prefer work with someone who is being prepared for management because you can give them some experiences that they've maybe not had access to in the past and kind of test the waters and see, is this something they really would enjoy doing or not, or even to identify where they might currently have gaps before being promoted. So, for example, perhaps you might give someone an opportunity to lead the team meeting this week. You put together the agenda, you facilitate it, you make sure that we don't go off on tangents or you manage tangents, make sure we're clear about decisions that have been made and actions that people have committed to doing and determining deadlines, and practice all of those things before you get into it. And then as you stumble, well, that's okay. You're not in that role yet. Let's give you some feedback. Let's give you some tips and tools for how you can be more effective next time. And hopefully you're hitting the ground running once you do get that promotion.
Yeah. And basically that is essentially everything that she did, that he put her in a position to do. And that's why she feels 100% prepared.
Great. Let's applaud that manager for setting her up for success.
I told her, I was like, that's a good boss. I say that because I work with Barry now. He is a good boss. He's a good leader in that he puts me in uncomfortable positions sometimes, but uncomfortable positions that he knows push just enough of my boundaries that make me a better employee.
Yeah, you mentioned that. I want to make a point as you say that because another way of saying what you're saying is that you're outside your comfort zone, right? And think back at your entire life. The only time you've ever grown was when you're outside of your comfort zone.
Yep.
So let's strategically push people outside their comfort zones so that they can up level and go to the next level.
Yeah.
So embrace those uncomfortable situations. Yeah.
I love that. Now, on the opposite side of that, a discussion that we had today, Barry doesn't like time wasting. And I think any leader just doesn't like time wasting, right? How do you get an employee or someone under you to understand, I want to communicate with you. I want you to ask me questions and come to me if you have any concerns or need to understand something. But how do you stop somebody from constantly asking questions, sometimes the same one over and over again?
That's good. Well, I was actually just talking with someone about a situation that's very similar to this. They were struggling with this at one of my clients that I'm working with. And what I suggest in situations like that is to not give an answer.
Really?
But ask. Oh, okay, so you're asking for me to make a decision for you. What would you do? Okay. Well, I don't know. Well, think about it. Maybe come back. If you're deciding which option, go do the research. Identify 3 or 4 options that we might want to choose. Come back with those 3 or 4 that you researched and investigated. also include which one do you recommend and why. If it's the right decision, you get to now as a manager say, I think that is the right decision, and here's why. And so you're supporting
Yep.
their logic. If it is not the right decision, you could say, I think that actually option 2 is going to be better. And here's why I say option 2. It's an opportunity now to coach and train them on your decision-making process and how you make decisions. And now they can also learn from that. So
That's amazing.
yeah.
I would never thought about it that way. Sometimes we ask the question back to people and they're like, well, I don't know. And I think the hardest part is getting people to problem solve.
Yeah.
That leading me up to emotional intelligence, which is a big key factor now for a lot of employers. What are some tips that you offer up and coming leaders or employers that are looking for those skill sets?
Yeah. Well, one of the very important things that any manager needs to do, they need to have strong working relationships with everyone on their team. The very best way to do that is to have regular, recurring one-on-one meetings with each person on the team. And in those meetings is where you really get to find out things that you could never find out otherwise. Now, I'll have some managers that will push back and say, well, we just had a team meeting. Do I really need to follow it up with a one-on-one meeting? Yes, you do. It's an entirely different kind of meeting. Or I just had a meeting getting an update on the project that so-and-so is working on. Do I really need to have a one-on-one meeting with them now? Yes, you do. Because one-on-one meetings they're not simply just an update. Matter of fact, there's a template that I recommend leaders do. So first off, start off every one-on-one meeting with what are recent successes you had since the last time we met.
Okay.
Because you'll learn about successes that your team is having that you would never learn otherwise. Because many times it's like, it's not big enough to let my boss know or whatever. But if you allocate like 3, maybe 5 minutes to just talk about successes, what's just 1, maybe 2 recent successes? And it might be, I finally figured out how to do this thing on an Excel spreadsheet. Great. Now I'm just to be aware of that, and you get to celebrate that together. That is a relationship building activity. I also believe that the next part of the agenda is what are the 1 or 2, maybe 3 key metrics that person is responsible for. And they should be able to come to the manager, to that meeting and say, here are my 2 or 3 key metrics. The trend is up, it's down, it's flat, whatever it is, and here's why. And here's what I'm doing differently now as a result. You can provide updates as well as part of this agenda, but one of the biggest parts here is to talk about what are the obstacles to you performing at a higher level. We all can perform at a higher level. Even the very best performers in your team, there's still room for them to improve. So what is it that keeps you from performing at just the smallest bit? What is it keeps you from going just a little bit higher in your performance?
Yep.
And whatever that is your obstacle. Well, now you work through and identify, well, what will it take to overcome that obstacle? And the person that the employee that's bringing to this meeting, they should be solving their own obstacles. The manager's there to help brainstorm about how to go about doing that, but they should be solving their own problems.
I was actually going to ask you, how do you ask an employee what are some things that you can go above and beyond outside of your job description? We love hearing that word. Oh, that's not in my job description, but if you're working in a team, how do you get everybody to be that team player?
Mm-hmm. Well, sure, there are some things that are just not in the job description, right? And one of the expectations are, and part of the culture, you could say, of our team is that we work well together and we bring up issues when issues come up. So even though it's not written in your job description per se, that is like an operational norm maybe of the team. So if they are not doing those things that are not outlined in their job description, you can absolutely talk about, well, what keeps you from performing at that? I mean, part of those things too, like that example, may come from the team's vision and mission statement. And the team and vision mission statement should be something that the team puts together as a team.
As a team.
Yeah.
Okay.
Everyone on the team should see their fingerprints all over I remember when we decided that word was important in that. So, teamwork and working together, that may be part of your vision or mission statement, maybe core values, things like that. But that is something that's absolutely within the realm of pointing back. It's not your job description, but we've all agreed this is how we're going to operate together.
Yeah. That's a discussion I actually had with everyone this morning. It's not your job description, but follow us, your own business
Yeah.
on social media. Repost those things. Have your family and friends be more aware of it.
Yeah.
And I know that it's not something that like they're supposed to be doing for their job, but it shows that they care. And I think that's the biggest thing, is showing that you care about your company and the values and the team as a whole. What are some tips that you have for aspiring leadership consultants, or even aspiring leaders that are going into a leadership position?
Yeah. So those who are aspiring, maybe they've identified, I want to get into leadership. Look for those opportunities to experience it before you get into it. Have those conversations with your boss and say, hey, at some point in the future, part of my career aspiration is I would love to manage or lead a team. Well, great. Now that I know that about you, maybe I can give you an opportunity to lead a project team, right? We're gonna let you lead this project, and it can be very strategic, right? And you get to practice some of those skills. Anytime you have a chance to exercise some leadership practice before you get into it, and just have those open, transparent conversations with your boss. Say, hey, I'm looking for opportunities. I want to grow. I want to go into management. I think that I do, right? So give me some opportunity to practice some of those skills.
I love that, because I would never mention anything about presenting to my board or anything like that out of the blue unless I had a boss that I felt encouraged me to be like, hey, I think I want to take the initiative and do this.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, that was great advice, because take the initiative. Even if you're scared to say something to your boss, be like, hey, I think I'm ready to take this step. So I'm glad that you said that. A lot of people are
let's
scared.
point back too is that the boss of that person, it's their job to create the culture where they feel comfortable with speaking up and saying, hey, I want this opportunity. Culture is the one thing that cannot be delegated. And that comes from the top down. I mean, whoever's in the leader is responsible for the entire team's culture, whatever that culture is. I know some leaders will even argue and say, well, I inherited this team. I didn't hire this team, right? I mean, I can't help who I have on my team. Well, it doesn't matter. They're yours now.
Yeah.
So set that culture, be intentional with the culture, and you're fully responsible for the culture of your team.
What are some tips that you can help a new leader of a team build that culture, have that open communication? Because I know for some people it's hard.
Yeah. Well, it's in your team meetings and have conversations with the team. What kind of culture do we want here? Like, everybody should be on board with what that is. It's part of expectation setting. Here's how we're going to operate. Here's what we can expect from each other. Get those things actually written down, so that you can reference back to them. I was doing some consulting work at a nuclear plant years ago, and one of the things was that they had worked really hard on like their vision and mission statement for how they're going to operate. And you know what happens to most of those? They go up on a shelf and no one ever sees them again, right? But they wanted to be intentional with it. And what they did is that at the beginning of every single staff meeting, they would have the vision or the mission at the top of the page. And they would say, in today's meeting, how are we going to exemplify the vision and mission that we have all committed that we're going to do? And at the end of the meeting, they'd say, how did we do?
Wow.
How do we do about going and applying the vision and mission that we have established for ourselves? And it's a real good check on, are you doing it or not? Don't put words on a page for nothing.
It's a form of accountability. I love that.
Yeah.
It's having that tough discussion with your team, but finding a solution to the problem. Yeah. Well, thank you for joining me today.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Of
I love
course.
this setup you got here.
Thank
This is
you.
high tech.
Yeah, Barry says a third grader can use it. He's right. They can once you learn it.
Technology should be that way. So a third grader can use it.
Yes.
Actually, some third graders are more technology advanced than I am. It's amazing.
Oh my gosh, my 15-year-old teenage cousin looked at me the other day and she was like, can you help me do this? And I looked at it and I was like, I don't know what you're asking me to help you with.
Yeah.
But thank you for joining me, everyone. Chris Jones, please find him on LinkedIn. And do you have social media?
Yeah. So Christopher Jones, or I am Christopher Jones, is my LinkedIn profile. By all means, please connect with me there.
Yep.
Send me a DM. Ask me any questions that you have. I love connecting with people specifically on LinkedIn for sure.
You really are a wealth of knowledge. And thank you so much for coming in to talk to me today. Everyone, this is BBB Sharing. Make sure to follow us on Spotify and LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram at Ignite, sparked by BBB in Central Virginia. Thank you.